All right, so you want to lose weight, right? Well, today we're going deep on this calorie deficit thing. We're going to figure out just how it works and why it matters for those of you trying to shed some pounds. We've got an excerpt here from WebMD. It's called Calorie Deficit, a complete guide. And we're really going to break it down for you.
Yeah, it's interesting. A lot of people get so focused on counting calories, but they don't always understand what those calories are really doing to their bodies.
Yeah, so we're going beyond just the food part of it, right?
Yeah.
Like no magic pills or anything like that. It really comes down to this calorie deficit thing.
Yeah, pretty much. So it all starts with understanding calories. They're basically units of energy that our bodies use for everything, from breathing to walking, even just thinking.
Yeah. And the more active you are, the more energy you need.
Exactly.
Right.
And if you eat more calories than you burn, your body stores that extra energy as fat.
Oh, so that's how we end up with those extra pounds.
Yeah.
So how do we shift things then? How do we start losing weight?
Well, that's where the calorie deficit comes into play. It's pretty straightforward, really. You need to eat fewer calories than your body burns. This forces your body to use up those stored fat reserves, and that leads to weight loss.
I see. So it's like tipping the scales in the other direction.
Exactly. Now, WebMD recommends aiming for a deficit of about 500 calories per day. This is considered a safe and sustainable rate, and it typically results in losing around a pound a week.
That makes sense. 500 calories doesn't sound too crazy, but I'm guessing our calorie needs are all different, right?
Oh, absolutely. Your age, sex, activity level, height, even your current weight all play a role. And what's really fascinating is your metabolism comes into play too. That's how efficiently your body burns those calories.
So how do we even figure out how many calories we need in the first place?
Well, there are some helpful tools out there, like you can find calorie calculators online. WebMD even mentions something called the Mifflin-St. Jur equation. It's a pretty reliable method.
That sounds kind of complicated.
Oh, it's not as bad as it sounds. It basically just factors in all those individual things we talked about. And then it gives you a personalized estimate of your calorie needs.
Oh, cool. So once we've figured out that baseline number,
Mm-hmm.
how do we actually create that 500 calorie deficit? Is it all about cutting back on food?
Well, it's really about finding the right balance between reducing your calorie intake and increasing your physical activity.
So it's a two-pronged approach.
Exactly, and ideally a combination of both is going to be the most effective. But before we get into the exercise part, let's talk about some simple dietary changes that can make a big difference.
Okay, that's good.
One of the easiest things you can do, and it's often overlooked, is swapping out sugary drinks for water.
Just water, seriously.
It might sound too simple, but trust me, sugary drinks are loaded with calories, and they offer very little nutritional value. So switching to water not only cuts those empty calories, but it also keeps you hydrated, which is super important for overall health. And it can even help manage those hunger pangs.
I'm already rethinking what I drink. But what about the food itself? There are so many different diets and eating patterns out there. What does WebMG recommend for creating a healthy calorie deficit?
Well, two diets they highlight are the DAS diet and the Mediterranean diet. These aren't just fads, they're more like lifestyle approaches, focused on eating real whole foods. You're talking about lots of fruits and veggies, lean proteins, healthy fats from nuts and olive oil, and fiber-rich whole grains.
Those actually sound pretty good. I'm all for healthy eating that doesn't feel like deprivation. So besides ditching the soda and trying out these eating styles, any other practical tips for making this whole calorie deficit thing easier?
Oh, for sure. Small changes can really add up. Like, try swapping those simple carbs, things like white bread and pasta, for whole grain options instead.
Okay, I can do that.
And when you're eating out, don't be afraid to ask for modifications to make dishes healthier. Or choose lighter options from the menu.
Good point.
And most importantly, become a label detective. The more you understand about what's actually in your food, the better choices you'll be able to make.
I like that label detective. I'm feeling more in control already. But let's back up for a sec. We talked about overall eating patterns, but what about specific meals? I always hear breakfast is the most important meal of the day.
Right.
But how does that fit into all of this?
Breakfast really is key. It can set the tone for your entire day, especially when it comes to managing your calorie intake. But it's not just about eating breakfast. It's also about what you choose to eat.
So what's the best way to start the day then?
WebMD really emphasizes getting enough fiber and protein in the morning. They help keep you feeling full and satisfied for longer, which can prevent those mid-morning energy slumps and cravings.
Makes sense. So what are some good examples of a power breakfast then?
Well, you could start your day with some Greek yogurt, maybe top it with some berries and a sprinkle of nuts. Or how about a veggie omelet packed with flavor? Even a protein smoothie can be a great option if you're on the go.
Yeah, those all sound pretty good.
The key is just combining those elements that will keep you feeling full and energized.
Okay, breakfast is officially revamped. Now, what about exercise? We touched on it briefly earlier, but how much does it actually contribute to creating that calorie deficit?
So diet is definitely the bigger player when it comes to calorie reduction, but exercise is like your secret weapon.
I like the sound of that.
WebMD recommends aiming for at least 30 minutes of moderate to vigorous exercise on most days of the week.
Okay. I can get behind that.
Yeah.
So what are some good ways to get moving that don't feel like a chore, I'm not exactly a gym rat.
Oh, you don't need to be. There are tons of fun ways to be active. How about a brisk walk out in nature or dancing to your favorite music? Even gardening can count.
Okay, that's more my speed.
And if you can push yourself to 45 minutes or more, even better.
Challenge accepted.
And don't forget about strength training. That's super important too.
Even for someone like me who's new to exercise.
Yeah, absolutely. You don't even need fancy equipment. You can do body weight exercises, using your own body as resistance.
Oh, so like squats and lunges and things like that.
Exactly. Those are great. Even simple things like lifting grocery bags or climbing stairs can contribute. The key is just to be consistent.
Okay, I can do that.
Yeah.
This is all great. I'm feeling pretty motivated. But what about those days when I'm just not feeling it? Or, when life just gets in the way? Are there any tools or resources that can help us stay on track?
Oh, absolutely. Technology can be a huge help these days. There are so many smartphone apps out there that can help you track your food intake, monitor your exercise progress, and even give you personalized guidance. It's like having a virtual coach right in your pocket.
That's awesome.
Mhm.
So we've talked a lot about the physical side of things, but what about the mental and emotional aspects of weight loss?
Oh, that's an important part of the equation, too. WebMD acknowledges that eating disorders can really complicate things. If you're struggling with that, it's crucial to seek professional help. There are different therapy approaches that can provide valuable support and help you develop a healthier relationship with food and your body.
Good point. It's not just about the numbers on the scale, right? It's about overall well-being.
Mm-hmm.
Before we move on, though, I want to address something that I know a lot of people wonder about. Potential risks. Are there any downsides to calorie restriction that we should be aware of?
There are, and it's definitely important to be informed. If calorie restriction isn't done safely and responsibly, there can be consequences.
Okay, like what?
Well, one of the biggest concerns is nutritional deficiencies. If you're drastically cutting calories without paying attention to the quality of your food, you might not be getting all the essential vitamins and minerals your body needs.
Yeah, that makes sense. So it's not just about eating less, it's about eating smart.
Exactly. You want to make sure every calorie counts. Another risk to be mindful of is how it affects your energy levels. Calories are fuel for your body, and when you deprive yourself of that fuel, it can go into conservation mode, which slows down your metabolism and leaves you feeling tired and sluggish.
Oh yeah, I've definitely experienced that before with restrictive diets. Not fun. Anything else?
Actually, even your brain function can be affected. Your brain needs energy to work properly. And when you're running on empty, your brain power can take a hit. You might have trouble concentrating, making decisions, or even remembering things.
Wow, I never thought about that. So it's like literally draining your brain.
Yeah.
What other risks should we be aware of when it comes to cutting calories too much?
Well, there's the risk of developing gallstones. Those are painful crystal-like deposits that can form in your gallbladder. Rapid weight loss, which can happen with severe calorie restriction, is a known risk factor for gallstones.
Okay, yeah, gallstones are definitely something I want to avoid. Any other red flags we should keep in mind?
This last one is really important. While calorie deficits are necessary for weight loss, they can also increase the risk of developing disordered eating patterns if they're not approached carefully.
Oh, right, we talked about it a little bit earlier.
Yeah, the constant focus on restricting food can lead to unhealthy obsessions and a distorted relationship with food.
So it's all about finding that balance, right?
Exactly. And that brings us to our next section, where we'll explore how to create a calorie deficit that supports both your physical and mental health.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground already. The basics of calorie deficits, potential risks, and that whole balance thing. What else is there to learn from this WebMD guide?
Well, remember how we talked about the magic of water? Swapping sugary drinks for water isn't just about cutting those empty calories. There's actually a fascinating link between hydration and how our bodies adapt to a lower calorie diet.
Really?
Okay, tell me more.
So research has shown that sometimes when we think we're hungry, our bodies are actually signaling thirst.
Interesting.
So before you grab a snack, try drinking a glass of water first. You might be surprised how effective it is at curbing those cravings.
Wow, I'm totally guilty of mistaking thirst for hunger.
It happens to the best of us. Here's another hydration tip that might surprise you. Even mild dehydration can actually slow down your metabolism.
What's serious? Yep, when you're dehydrated, your body goes into conservation mode, trying to hold on to every bit of water it can. This can lead to a decrease in calorie expenditure, making it harder to maintain that calorie deficit.
I had no idea dehydration could have such a big impact. Water is my new best friend.
It really is essential for so many reasons. Speaking of well-being, let's circle back to the mental and emotional side of weight loss. This is where things can get a little tricky.
Yeah, for sure. We talked about eating disorders earlier, but what about those everyday struggles like emotional eating or just staying motivated?
Those are definitely common challenges, and WebMD offers some really helpful strategies for dealing with them. One of the key takeaways is self-awareness. Paying attention to your eating habits and identifying your triggers can make a huge difference.
So like noticing when you reach for comfort food after a stressful day, or maybe when you're more likely to skip meals when you're feeling down.
Exactly. Once you're aware of those patterns, you can start to develop healthier coping mechanisms. For example, if stress eating is a problem for you, try finding other ways to manage that stress. Things like exercise, meditation, or spending time in nature.
Good ideas.
It's all about finding what works for you.
But what about motivation? How do we stay motivated when those cravings and temptations hit?
Well, mindset is a big part of it. WebMD recommends setting realistic goals and focusing on progress, not perfection.
Progress over perfection. I like that.
Remember, weight loss is a journey, not a race. There will be ups and downs along the way, but it's important to celebrate your successes and not get discouraged by setbacks.
So true. It's all about the long game. Any other motivational tips from the guide?
Finding an accountability partner or joining a support group can be really helpful. Having someone to share your journey with can make a world of difference. And remember those smartphone apps we talked about? A lot of them have built-in communities and support features. That can provide that extra boost of motivation.
Yeah, that's a great point. It's easier to stay on track when you feel supported. But let's be real. Even with the best intentions, we all slip up sometimes. What's the best way to get back on track after a setback?
The most important thing is to be kind to yourself. Don't dwell on the slip-up. Just acknowledge it, learn from it, and move on. Remember, tomorrow is a new day, a fresh start to make healthier choices.
I love that perspective. It's so easy to beat ourselves up over it. But approaching setbacks with self-compassion is definitely more helpful. This brings up another question. We've been focusing on calorie deficits for weight loss. But what about people who are already at a healthy weight? Or those who might be at risk of developing disordered eating habits? Should they be worried about calorie deficits?
That's a really important point. Calorie deficits aren't a one-size-fits-all approach if you're already at a healthy weight. Your goal is to maintain that weight, not necessarily create a deficit. It's more about finding that balance of calories in versus calories out.
So it's not about constant restriction. It's about finding a sustainable balance.
Exactly. And for anyone with a history of, or who might be at risk of developing an eating disorder, it's crucial to talk to a healthcare professional before making any major dietary changes, including intentionally creating a calorie deficit.
It's always best to get personalized guidance and prioritize health above all else.
Okay, so we've talked about the potential downsides of cutting calories too much. But can a calorie deficit be too small?
That's a good question. Technically, any deficit should lead to some weight loss, but if the deficit is too small, you might not see results quickly enough, and that can lead to frustration and make it harder to stick with the plan.
So it's about finding that sweet spot, a deficit that's big enough to promote weight loss, but not so extreme that it affects our health or motivation.
Exactly. It's a delicate balance, and it often takes some experimentation to find what works best for you.
That makes sense. Everyone's different. Any tips on how to find that sweet spot? Well, WebMD suggests starting with a moderate deficit of 500 calories per day, like we discussed earlier, and then monitor your progress closely. If you're not seeing results after a couple of weeks, you might need to adjust your deficit slightly. But remember, it's always a good idea to talk to a healthcare professional before making any big changes to your diet or exercise routine.
Solid advice. I'm feeling a lot more confident about this whole calorie deficit thing now. But before we wrap up, I wanted to touch on something we haven't really discussed yet. Building muscle while in a calorie deficit. Is that even possible?
It is, but it definitely requires a more careful approach. Remember, building muscle takes energy, so you need to make sure you're eating enough calories to support that growth, while still maintaining a slight deficit for fat loss.
So maybe not a full 500 calorie deficit, if I'm also lifting weights.
Exactly. You might need to adjust your deficit based on how intensely you're training and what your goals are. It's a good idea to talk to a registered dietitian or a certified personal trainer to create a personalized plan that supports both muscle gain and fat loss.
Okay, that sounds like a good plan. And what about protein? I've always heard it's important for building muscle. How much protein should we be aiming for when we're in a calorie deficit?
That's a great question. When you're cutting calories, it's super important not to skimp on protein. In fact, you might even need to increase your protein intake to help your muscles repair and grow.
So more lean protein, fewer carbs and fats. Got it. I'm ready to build some muscle. What else should we know about this whole balancing act?
Yeah, it really is a delicate balancing act, you know? You want to fuel those muscles, but still stay in that calorie deficit to lose the fat.
Right. Yeah, it's like fine-tuning a recipe or something.
That's a good way to put it.
So besides protein, are there any other things we need to think about when it comes to diet and building muscle while in a calorie deficit?
Well, one thing that really stood out to me from the WebMD guide is how important the timing of your meals is, especially when it comes to working out.
Oh, interesting. Tell me more about that.
So after you work out, your muscles are basically primed to absorb nutrients. It's the perfect time to replenish your energy stores and give your body the building blocks it needs to repair and grow those muscles.
So it's not just what we eat, but when we eat it.
Exactly.
So what should we be eating after a workout then?
WebMD recommends a combo of protein and carbs. Protein helps repair and rebuild those muscle tissues, and carbs help replenish your energy.
Okay, so what would that look like in real life?
Well, a simple example would be a protein shake with a banana, or some grilled chicken breast with sweet potato.
All right, that sounds easy enough.
Mm.
Any other tips for making sure we're eating right to build muscle?
One more thing that's often overlooked is sleep.
Sleep. What does sleep have to do with muscles?
Well, believe it or not, most muscle growth and repair happens while you're sleeping.
Oh, really? I had no idea.
Yeah, and when you don't get enough sleep, your body produces more of the stress hormone cortisol, which can actually break down muscle tissue.
Wow, that's the opposite of what we want.
Right, so aim for 7 to 9 hours of good sleep each night to give those muscles time to recover and grow.
Okay, noted. I'm starting to see how everything's connected here. It's really a holistic approach. I feel like we've learned so much today. Any final thoughts before we wrap up this deep dive?
You know, the thing that really strikes me about all of this is that knowledge is power. The more you understand about how your body works and how different things can affect your weight loss journey, the better choices you can make.
I completely agree. We've definitely gone beyond just surface level diet advice today. I feel like I have a much better understanding of calorie deficits now. Any parting words of wisdom for our listeners out there?
Remember, it's not about being perfect or comparing yourself to other people. It's about finding what works for you and making sustainable changes that you can stick with. Start small, be consistent, and don't be afraid to ask for help along the way.
Love it. So to our amazing listeners out there, we hope you found this deep dive insightful and empowering. Remember, every journey starts with a single step, and even small changes can make a big difference over time.
Here's one last question for you to think about. What's one small change you can make today to start moving towards a healthier you? Maybe swap out that sugary drink for water, or add some extra veggies to your plate. Maybe go for a short walk, or prioritize getting enough sleep. Every little bit counts.
You've got this. Thanks for joining us, everyone. We'll catch you next time.